I came into the sixth grade at this school not knowing how to read on grade level. Students weren't laughing at me like they were at other schools. They were actually trying to help.
If you've been listening to this show, you know one of the topics I'm most passionate about is making sure that each and every child in America has the chance to succeed in school. For that, I often talk with guests who've overcome incredible adversity, people who've shown resilience and turned their story into something bigger than themselves. Today, I have such a guest. Denisha Merriweather Allen failed third grade twice. She was told she wouldn't make it. But she found a school that fit, earned a scholarship, and turned her life all around. She went on to become the first in her family to graduate college and later earn a master's degree. Now, she leads Black Minds Matter, supporting Black school leaders and creating opportunities for families across the country. So, I want to know, how does a story like Denisha's become a movement? And what will it take to make sure opportunity reaches every child, not just the lucky few? Denisha, welcome to the show. Denisha, once again, welcome to the show. I am so happy to have you on, and it's going to be a fun conversation.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
You know, your story is so compelling. And look, I know you've heard that a lot, but with the work you're doing, the work that you know I'm passionate about in terms of making sure that every child feels valued and feels like that they can go to a school that works for them. I mean, you epitomize that. And I have to say, failing third grade twice, what did that feel like? And talk about that recovery period, because for you to be in that place where you're being told by the adults who have custody of your education that you can't learn, talk about that.
Yes, and you know, we're having this conversation. I am well into my adult years, and you know, the impact of those early years academically, they still weigh on me. You know, I have children now, and I even think how, you know, I thank God for resilience, because some of those early days and the challenges that I went through both in my home and academically, my kids will never have to deal with those things. And that's why I am passionate about the work that I do, so that no kid across America should have to deal with some of the things that I dealt with. But, you know, growing up, I not only struggled in school, but I came from an unstable family home environment. We were oftentimes homeless, and, you know, the definition, you know, going couch surfing and living in hotel rooms. We were not well off. Living in Jacksonville, Florida on the east side, it's a community that's ridden with poverty and high crime. We often didn't have lights, you know, we didn't have water on, and that spilled over into the classroom. I looked different from everyone. I acted different from everyone. And then academically, I struggled. I come from a family of high school dropouts, and education was not something that was valued. The Merriweather name followed me into the classroom, and teachers would sigh. This is kindergarten, first, second, third grade. Teachers would sigh visibly. Here goes another Merriweather. You know, we got to deal with another one in our class this year. That made me really despondent. You know, talk about feelings. I did not feel very motivated or enthused about going into this, you know, into this place, knowing that I looked different than students, and I was not reading or performing academically. One of my first earliest memories of school, it was me asking to go to the restroom. I was raising my hand. I need to go. And the teacher said, no, you need to sit down. You don't listen to me, so why should I listen to you? And I walked out. I walked up and got, left out of class. And she said, you need to leave. Go to the principal's office. No, this was about second grade. Yelling, screaming. No, she picks me up and starts to drag me out of class. I'm holding on to the walls, holding on to the floor, trying to grab anything to keep from getting kicked out of class. And I remember that. I remember just like, I actually wanted to learn. I actually wanted to be there. But I didn't know how to. This is second grade. And so I'm now in a place where I'm looking at my children. I'm like, wow, developmentally, their kids, develop, the brain is not developed, and kids throwing tantrums and all this stuff. You don't blame the kid, you kind of, all these skills and stuff of dealing with children. And what if someone dealt with me like a child in those early years and helped me? And I had the opportunity so I failed the third grade twice, couldn't read, taking my state assessments.
Let me jump in for a quick moment. For a lot of students, the traditional model just isn't the right fit. That's why more than 3 million families have chosen K-12 powered schools offering flexible, tuition-free learning options with certified teachers and a personalized approach that meets learners where they are. If that sounds worth exploring, you can head to k12.com/podcast. All right, back to the conversation.
Couldn't read a licking, and masking it, fighting in school, was not a very good student when it comes to being disruptive and all this stuff. And that's what happened in those early years, and it felt bad. It felt like there was no hope. It felt like
your story is so unfortunately typical. And there's so much that comes from your story that's informative. I've had a lot of shows where we talk with teachers and talk with parents and talk with students. And there are a couple of realities. One is that if a teacher doesn't make sure that each and every child feels valued and worthy and worth being there in the classroom, then they're not going to do well. And the other reality, though, is sometimes it takes just one positive influence to turn things around. And in your life, in your world, you ended up living with your godmother, who really valued you and instilled that belief, that can-do belief in you. And then you changed schools, and you went to a school where you were embraced. How did that feel? And I guess the real question is, when did you really believe you could succeed in school after those two factors?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Kevin, because one, my godmother has been that stable person in my life since the moment I was born. And then to go and live with her permanently, she had always, grounded me in church. And she's like, you need to go to church, And those are the types of things that happen just on weekends. When I started to live with her permanently, that gave me stability. It did. And that's a factor in my story that I don't often talk about. Like kids having stability matters, that matters. And I started going to a private school. She didn't have, her income was not that much better. She had stable income. She was a physical therapist, but she was able to put me in a private school on a scholarship, on a tax credit scholarship in Florida. And her mission was, you need to get out of this environment that you're stuck in. I was changing schools often, and she knew that finding a stable environment for me academically. Now, this was also the school that our church had started. And so she wanted me to be around, everyone that would correct my behavior, because I morphed. During the school day, I was someone different. On Sunday morning, I was another kid. No one would ever know that Denisha was causing a ruckus in them people's school building. And she knew that would help, get me into, and it did. And so I went from being around, in a home environment where it didn't seem like my biological mother cared. And then I went to school and it didn't seem like the teachers cared, nor my peers. And that totally shifted. I went from a home then to a home environment where my godmother loved me and wanted to put me in environments where that love would also be seen. The school environment, the teachers cared deeply, not only about my academic success, but all around, wrap around, and my peers. I think that's a part where peers are very important. Interact. So yeah, we need teachers to love on students and show that they care, but also the kids who you're interacting with, those also need to be sound. And I came into the 6th grade at this school not knowing how to read on grade level, and reading out loud, from a basic sense of reading out loud, students weren't laughing at me like they were at other schools. They weren't laughing. They were actually trying to help, and being very encouraging. You got this, girl, like you can do it. That was motivating as well. Everyone making the honor roll, and then you're the only one. It was a culture of excellence, and I rose to the challenge, and I'm so happy for it.
One thing that's real powerful that about your story is, as a result of that support, being in a new school, having the stability in your home life after school hours, you excelled. You were the first Merriweather. You changed the trajectory of the Merriweather name to go to college, graduate from college. You have a master's degree. You've had various work experiences from the American Federation of Children to Department of Education. You've testified in Congress. You spoke at a rally, school choice rally, with thousands of people. At some point in time, though, you realized that just telling your story wasn't enough, that in order to play a major role in contributing to the conversation about parents having the right to choose what's best for their children, and children having options other than the school that's located in their zip code, what led you to really focus on moving beyond just the symbol to the activists for parents and families?
Of course. And so much of the work that we're both doing in storytelling is sharing those powerful stories. It's not for the faint of heart, and you do a beautiful job with your podcast sharing so many stories, and I appreciate you having me on, because it is important to share. But to your point, when I was in high school, the scholarship program had been sued in Florida. And this is the program that I'd benefited from. If not all of the students at my private school benefited from this program. The teachers union was suing the program, and I had no idea at the moment. It was a little bit confusing to me what was going on in the politics realm of this movement in the early years. And there were many solicitations to share stories and, in the suit, share the tagline, and I was just, thinking that really, during those early years, that really impacted me a lot, and it hurt me because I was almost done with my education. I was in high school senior, about to go off to college, and this little kid at my school, he was about in kindergarten, he was involved in one of the commercials that we were shooting to end the suit, drop the suit. And he came to me, he's like, "Wait, Denisha, am I gonna get kicked out?" And because this little kindergarten kid, he's his eyes are so curious, and he was just so happy to be a part of this commercial that was going to be aired on television across the state. And it hit him, what are we talking about? Wait a minute, am I going to be kicked out of my school? And for me, that turned a page. I don't want that to happen. I know that there are students who have experienced way more trauma in their education than I had. And I don't want any kid to experience trauma in school. I want them to live full, bright, healthy lives and be successful. And that is one of the moments that turned the page for me. Another moment that turned the page for me was actually when our governor at the time, Charlie Crist, he was a Republican governor, and then he supported school choice. I was able to be, again, a high school student at the Florida Capitol, receiving a signing pin. Photos everywhere of me receiving the signing pin from our governor. He expanded the scholarship program in the state. And it was amazing. Everyone at my church, everyone in my community, I was also involved in police athletic league. Everyone was raving, Denisha, we saw this. This is amazing. I'm like, yes, a local celebrity. The moment he decided to run again, but this time as a Democrat, he said, oh, these people were pulling my leg. They were, this was some ploy to get me to do it. And I don't support this scholarship program anymore. I'm going to eject all these kids from the schools. I'm going to end funding. And I got a whiff of the politics. And I began to dive deeper. Instead of just sharing my story and, just sharing at events across the country, I began to put my ear to the ground and try to get a wave on what is this politics that's going on? I don't quite understand. I don't get it. And why are students and parents the political football during this time? How can I help combat this? And those are the two moments early on where I decided that, I want to go a little bit deeper. I want to go a little bit deeper in this movement of education reform and help make sure that the voices of the movement are the ones who are face front and center. Be that the students who are benefiting from the program, or the education entrepreneurs who are, utilizing these programs to help students more. I want for the beneficiaries, the voices in this movement to be the face of the movement. And so that when these things happen in the world, just random acts, we will be able to point to the folks who are really at the center, at the heart.
One of the most crippling aspects of education in America is, frankly, the politics of education. When you recite your story, and I've heard similar stories like it, this idea of what's best for children, or how can we ensure that things we know will help children learn, continue to grow and thrive, that gets lost in the political sphere. You've been active by using your voice to speak out against ludicrous, insane sort of results that come from the politics of education. But you've landed in an interesting place. Statistics show that only 6% of America's teachers are African American, and only 1% African American men, and there are a few number of African American school leaders. You founded Black Minds Matter as a way to highlight the fact that we need to have support for these fledgling school leaders who are doing a tremendous job in the classroom, but oftentimes get overlooked, oftentimes aren't as politically connected. And you've done an amazing job bringing together school leaders from all walks of life to celebrate them and to make sure that their voices are heard. Talk a little bit about Black Minds Matter.
Yes. I started this project in 2020, and this is the time of civil unrest. Not surprising. This is when George Floyd was murdered, and everyone was getting canceled left and right for not promoting Black excellence. And at the initial time, I'm looking around like, this might actually help the education freedom movement. Black students can't read. When we look at national statistics, look at NAEP scores, and recent NAEP scores have just again confirmed that African American students are far and far behind. This was before COVID, and so we can't blame COVID for the academic outcomes of Black and brown kids in the country. Only 15% of Black kids are reading on grade level, and that's very near to my heart because I couldn't read and struggled for a very long time. And so I looked at this the cancel movement and thought, well, we're going to cancel these poor academic outcomes for students, but instead we supported pancake mix and syrup being canceled. And, those frustrations got bottled up in an op-ed. And little did I know that op-ed titled Black Minds Matter would resonate with so many. And people would reach out and say, what more are you going to do? This is a very provocative topic. And I'm like, wait a minute, we've been talking about school choice for more than 30 years. This is not new. But I'll run with the provocative name. And so running with this, name of Black Minds Matter and doing a deep dive, really thanks to the great work at Step Up for Students, Ron Mattis, and looking at our history and our people. And I went to a Black founded school. I never thought for a moment, I went to a Black founded school. It never crossed my mind that was a thing or that it was unique. And I discovered we went down this rabbit hole of how many can we find across the country? How many Black founded schools are out there? We're still expanding our directory, but we have over 500 schools that we've just, rummaged through online databases to find. That's a remarkable number. And then went a little deeper, like, okay, let's connect with these people. These people are at the forefront of the movement. They are beneficiaries on so many aspects. So they have students and parents in their schools. They are educators. All of these, check the boxes. They're minorities, they're Black and brown people. And they're at the implementation phase 2 of this movement. They're working with oftentimes their scholarship granting organizations and the state legislature and parents and students to get them enrolled on the programs. We're not hearing from them on what's working, what's not working. Let's hear from them. And it's been really cool to hear these education entrepreneurs to hear their stories. To your point, they're mostly former public school teachers who decided, I want to help kids more. My hands are a little bit tied, in the district, and I can't do any worse. And I want to help these kids get I want to help kids get a better education. These education entrepreneurs and their stories, their missions, they're so diverse. You got the hippy dippy schools, you got the Montessori, you got the, financial literacy schools, the AI school, all girls, all boys, everything so diverse, all with the same mission. And I also wanted to hear and highlight the voices of all different types of school leaders. I don't care about, the school being a charter school or the school being a private school or it being a homeschool or micro school. I want to hear all the voices that's out there. And that also set us apart. We were agnostic as to what type of schooling environment we would promote. And the stories, the community, so vibrant. They hadn't been heard before. They also, which is interesting, I would reach out and say, hey, you're a Black school founder. I want to hear from you. They would kind of scratch their head like, I never thought about it like that. Like I didn't think that. And so even with the work of Black Minds Matter, they're now branding themselves and their own promotion of their school and their personal brands as Black school founders and inviting that into their identity, because before they weren't even, their head down in the work trying to give kids a high quality education. And what I came in and did was say, hey, can you lift your head out of the sand and lend your voice to getting high quality bills passed? And they were all for it.
Yeah, and you've done amazing work with it. Hearing you talk about the different types of schools and the diversity in terms of approaches to educating our children, meeting kids where they are. No two children are alike, so there shouldn't just be one system that kids learn in. It just speaks to the fact that it's okay to share those voices, and it's also okay for us to embrace these micro schools and hybrid schools and AI. When you think about what's coming down the pike, now that you've become more steeped and, as you said, have done a deeper dive, not just in education freedom or school choice, but really what's going on in the nitty gritty of schooling, what excites you, and what are you concerned about in terms of the future of education?
Well, I think what's exciting, at the federal level, we now have a federal tax credit, and everyone is really looking forward to how this is going to play out and roll out, and rules making and all the things. How are we going to provide every student in America with opportunity? And I think that is going to continue a very long conversation around what schooling looks like in America. I'm really excited that maybe now we deal with the compulsory law. We mandate that kids go to school every day for so many hours. The attendance law is so strict. And what would it look like to have a free system of education that is totally opt in, opt out, and free? I especially since we're living in a global, economy where we can catch a flight and go, get on the train and go, bullet trains, metros, and all the different forms of transportation. AI is increasing, and many of the mundane day-to-day, large language systems that we deal with can be easily done away with and taken over by AI. So what would it look like to have more community for students, for their lives and for our families' lives? That is real. That excites me too. I love seeing kids outside playing. When I'm driving and I see kids outside, playing, and that is so cool. And that's what excites me. I'm really looking forward to, and we see a little bit of it, to be honest. Across the country, we have where parents are now homeschooling at higher rates than before. Even in the black community, they had the highest growth in demographic group for homeschooling, and this is post COVID in Florida. Many of the families who are now taking scholarship are taking scholarship to homeschool, and so I'm hoping that hopefully the system will not just every student opts in to homeschool in order for this to happen. My big dream of ending compulsory, but that's also a way to do it where parents say, well, you know what? In order to have the freedom of my kid to come and go and do, we're just going to homeschool. And homeschool is now so diverse, and it's not just sitting at home anymore. It's micro schools. It's really cool to see this growth. I know I really got excited about that one. What was the next part? What was the other part of your question?
I asked you, and this is the last question, what are your concerns? Because I agree with you that the future horizon, particularly in terms of, parental choice, school choice, educational freedom options, is going to grow. But it also suggests that the system is going to change radically. And you're right. I mean, people are going to talk about compulsory education. They're going to talk about more specialty schools, hybrid schools, home schools, what have you. In the wake of all that, what are you concerned about?
Well, I'm concerned about, this is kind of a full circle, because the students who this movement intended to support and to highlight are the low income students, the most vulnerable kids in the system. Those students are more often than not Black and brown. And they are not privileged of, my big dream on this side of, parents being able to opt their kids out and take them to France if they want. Those are the kids they won't have those freedoms as much unless we focus on them and provide a space for them to still have access to education freedom. And so the movement has grown substantially, and we've achieved so much in the education reform space. But we also have a new problem where we really still have to do our main mission of focusing on low income students. And so I most of the students in the system will remain in the traditional public school system. We still have a large minority of students who are choosing, about 7 million kids, as opposed to 74 million, kids in the system. And so we still need to focus on them and making sure that they have a high quality education. And so that concerns me. It also concerns me that, the education entrepreneur being supported in creating learning environments, because we have so many opportunities now for kids to pick and choose, but we're still seeing that there are not enough outlets for families to choose and pick for their kids. And so we still need we don't have a robust system of supporting entrepreneurs. And so my hope is that, the big foundations, that we have a stable income source from this federal tax credit, that now more foundations and will get on board, for-profit industries will get on board with supporting education entrepreneurs, because I do think that is also, if we don't focus in on these two groups of people, we will be back at square one. We will really lose what we intended to do. And so, that's it.
Well, Denisha, I really think that you hit the nail on the head. Those are legitimate concerns. We need to remember why we got involved in this movement to begin with. At the end of the day, if one child is not learning, no child is really learning. We all suffer. Denisha Merriweather Allen, thank you so much for joining us on What I Want to Know.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure. This has been so fun, and I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to What I Want to Know. Be sure to follow and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app, so you can explore other episodes and dive into our discussions on the future of education. And write a review of the show. I also encourage you to join the conversation and let me know what you want to know using hashtag WIWTK on social media. That's hashtag WIWTK. For more information on Stride and online education, visit stridelearning.com. I'm your host, Kevin P. Chavous. Thank you for joining What I Want to Know.